Any of you have school phobia? You did? Have you had a mean teacher? Shoot. Let me set this up. Hurry up and go out. God, I'm getting away from you. Yes, wait.
Here, we'll be set to go. How did you break your toe?
I was going upstairs last night and I hit it against the stairs. Yeah, it sounds exciting, doesn't it? I have to make up. Should come up with a good story for that.
Well, not total, she was able to get inside.
God, Susan. Was that projection or what? Usually get drunk going up the stairs.
It's a story on cryonics, and I thought it was a pretty interesting topic. It had to do something with part of our death lecture that Ms. Davis had with us the other day. But basically, I don't know if any of you know what cryonics mean. Has anybody ever heard of the term cryonics? Yeah, okay. Well, as I was conducting my research on cryonics, the topic was a very enlightening experience. I basically didn't think that it would ever work or had any practical experiences. But as I continued the study of this, I found out to be very amazed that it actually had a lot of practical applications. They were able to freeze monkey brains and bring it back to, thaw it out, bring it back to an actual functional brain, which was pretty interesting to me. But anyway, let's get right to the heart of the project here, and that's basically the terminology of cryonics, and basically it's cryonics is said to be the practice of freezing people at death in the hope that later on they may be revived. Cryosuspension itself does not appear to be a very complicated or technical procedure. In the cryonics business, they use what is called a hermetically sealed container, an HSC, to preserve the body or body parts such as the head. In essence, it is a giant steel capsule preserved in liquid nitrogen, about 321 degrees below zero. Once the body is placed in this double-chambered high-volume capsule, it will remain for decades or even centuries. And according to the American Association of Blood Banks Technical Manual, there has been proven cryopreservation of blood and tissue by the use of cryoprotective agents such as glycerol and dimethyl oxide. In case you're taking notes, and I'll do this at home. This usage of these agents are needed for the reduction of cellular dehydration, which I do have an overhead that I'll show you in just a little bit, what exactly happens to the cells if you change the varied freezing rates. Basically, the intracellular formation of ice crystals can damage the cells, so you want to protect it as much as possible. The idea is to find a cooling rate just less than that which causes intracellular freezing. At this ideal cooling rate, enough water leaves the cell to produce mild intracellular hypertonicity and retard intracellular ice formation, but not so much as to cause significant dehydration. Like I said, I'll show you that overhead in just a minute. The legal and moral or religious implications that need to be considered in order to be considered for a cryosuspended candidate. You must tell your relatives of your desire for suspension, and to legitimate and add confirmation to these desires by signing and having your relatives sign body authorization permits. The moral and religious considerations are basically matters of opinion. It is interesting to note that we as a society can be allowed to do anything we desire as long as we as a society don't make any major attempts at protest, such as in relation to cryonics. Once the decision has been made for cryosuspension, a cryonic society must be notified for preparations upon your death. Other considerations of cryosuspension are the financial obligations of your suspension. According to the book Cryogenics, dated 1979, they disclose this information that A West Coast Society, which is currently doing suspensions, recommends that individuals have a $50,000 life insurance policy with the society and name them as the beneficiary. Initial cost of suspension is $10,000, and it's thought that the interest accrued from the remaining $40,000 will be sufficient to cover $2,000 of maintenance, yearly maintenance fees. After conducting my research on this topic of crimes, I concluded that in years to come, the applications of this procedure will be as typical as open heart surgery. Although it's a very fascinating field of science, I particularly would not want to consider myself this procedure. I think we're just basically achieving the inevitable. That's my opinion. Anyway, I have a little overhead. I'll just have to take the toe. As I said before, we have varied freezing rates here. And as you can see, if you freeze a cell very slowly, what happens is you'll lose too much water from the cell, thus creating a very fragile frozen cell when you thaw it out. And it's actually just a bad cell. It wouldn't come back to life, so to speak. If you freeze the cell too fast, you have not enough water leaving the cell, and what you have is ice formations crystallizing inside the cell, and that will damage the cell as well. The optimal freezing rate is what we want to achieve here. That's just enough water leaves the cell, but not enough to dehydrate it, and thus creating a perfect frozen cell. Now the way that we're able to do that is with cryoprotective agents such as the glycerol that I've mentioned and the dimethyl sulfoxide. And of course you can see we're using a red cell and our water and using this as a key for frozen ice. So what we have today, or what I brought today, is our instant freeze, some fish, our cryoprotective agent, and hopefully what we want to do today is freeze the fish and bring it back to life. Now I did this about 2 weeks ago. To my amazement, we were able to freeze a goldfish and bring it back to life, and it lasted for 20 seconds. That was a couple of weeks ago, and as a matter of fact, one of your students, she's in your evening classes, and she was there to watch that. But in any case, we're going to go ahead and try it again, and hopefully it'll work. Okay, we have live goldfish here. And nobody's in the Jock Cousteau Society of any sort, are they? I'd be offended by this. I guess what you can do right now is just maybe splicing the commercial at this time. I'll get this bag open if you want.
Tear.
Yeah. Okay, is there any lump nails here?
Nope, we're all neurotic.
Erotic, huh? Okay, experiment's over. We have our little goldfish here, and this is our instant spray. It does freeze pretty good. So formulating nice crystals. What we want to do is layer our water here and freeze it. But first, we need to use what is called a cryoprotective agent to protect the cells. Like I explained earlier, we don't want it to damage the fish's cells. seal. Fish, we have our protective agent. Now we have snow. As I said, we're trying to see that fish jump? Just kidding. Not quite 321 degrees that we want, but that's okay. We're certainly not Cryogenics laboratory here. It's pretty close to being suspended here.
Mad scientist.
I wonder if this is how Dr. Mingley got started out.
Really?
I think maybe perhaps our cryoprotective agent was really working here. Okay, it looks pretty frozen to me. Everybody see that fish?
The water stays, water, I guess that's crowd.
That's the agent. That's
Oh, that's
suspension. What I wanted to do is completely freeze him, so that way you can see that he is totally frozen.
Can you take it out or you can't take it out?
Like an ice cube? No.
Put it in a glass of water or something?
Well, I mean, I guess it'd be a pretty good party favor, but. Okay, that's protective agent, as you can see, I shall talk a little bit.
Ice cube.
It's pretty frozen. It's a little, see them back there. You can see them in the camera here. Zoom right in.
Pretty frozen.
Okay, now, as we are going to.
Shit.
Yeah, we
Should give him a wool blanket.
hopefully. Now, if you can make him come back here, that'll be pretty nice. more than likely is this protective agent.
Well, yeah, it took him a few minutes to,
Protective agent will more than likely
he's coming around, but it's
Do
gonna
him-
take him a few minutes. It's
do
not
them under
loud.
because,
The protective agent will do one?
yeah, well, actually, this is freezing mechanism. This is kind of harsh to the cells itself. And
Yeah, yeah.
what happens is if you're able to totally protect them and keep them from this environment, you're more likely to be able to respond much better. But I think you got the idea here, and that's basically, yeah, cryonics.
One question, how
Yes.
far are we advanced in terms of being able to do that with humans?
Well, we're able to preserve the human beings. That's not the problem. The problem probably stems as far as being able to bring them back to life as far as the thawing procedures, being able to thaw them out slowly. Because as you can see, this fish has probably had some severe brain damage and some other damage as well. And like I said, it's due to this agent right here. It's not because he's been frozen. It's because he's been exposed to chemicals. And that's what kills him.
No, I see.
Right now, they do have several individuals frozen. They're able to, like I said, freeze red packed blood cells and thaw them out by the use of glycerol. So we're able to do that.
But they haven't tried to unfreeze the humans yet, right?
Not to my knowledge, but they were able to freeze and thaw brains as well, and have normal electrical activity with the brains, lasting for 120 days. So practicality is there, and I think the technology is certainly getting there. And I'd say in years to come, it's pretty just like our surgery and be suspended as well.
Okay, thank you. That was very good. I think we need to give him a